next speaker is Dr. Ed Johnston, who is moving on slightly from the post-PhD into consultant life and academia as a consultant. So he's an academic interventional radiology consultant at the Royal Marsden. His research interests are in all areas of biopsy and ablation, obviously with an interventional oncology focus, and he's got a particular interest in computer-assisted intervention. Ed has been vital in my own academic journey in providing excellent advice for me. So Ed, it's really a great honor to have you here, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Good. That is good news to me. Right. So I'm going to share my screen. Right. Let's see.
Yeah, I see your desktop and the PowerPoint.
Great. And you can see that. Yeah.
See your PowerPoint.
Right. Okay. So yes, I'm Ed. Hi everyone. And yeah, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for coming. So what I'm going to talk about is basically the journey from PhD to becoming more or less an independent academic, or at least having independent ideas, being able to lead a team. I still don't have all of the answers myself. I wish I did, but I'll tell you about my struggle. And it is a struggle, but I'm starting to see some results. So I think it's been worth it so far. I'm going to talk about doctorates, IR training as an academic, academic versus clinical job structures. Think about what kind of academic you want to be, what sort of research you want to do, what and who you're up against. You know, grants are very competitive, and a little bit about academic IR in the UK, a bit about mentorship, some of the hurdles I've overcome, what I've learned, and my story. I'm going to try and cram it in because I know we're behind time. So I'm going to start with the big questions. The meaning of life. I don't really know whether life has to have a meaning in particular. But the thing is about this is why I put this up here is actually don't ask the big questions. Don't start with the meaning of life. You know, you want to if you want to find out about the meaning of life, then you probably need to think about how the birds, you know, pollinate. The bees pollinate the flowers, blah blah, so forth. Some kind of small stuff, and build up a picture. So don't look at the big professors and the big picture and think, how am I going to get there? Think in steps that you've got to achieve. So PhD and so forth. So ignore the big questions. Where it comes to a PhD, so you do need to get one. So I think increasingly to actually lead an academic team formally, universities look for these pretty solid credentials. That's becoming more essential. So PhD is something, you know, it's going to allow you to learn scientific methods. It gives you a period of focused research where you can actually kind of think big and not get too bogged down with clinical. So the sort of take-home message already is, if you don't have a PhD, don't worry really too much about this talk. Find a PhD, do one, and enjoy the sort of fruits of what other people have built up. Because after the PhD, it's probably going to be very tough out there. And of course, to bear in mind, it's not about the letters. It's about the skills. You know, like medicine, you don't think about the letters every day while you're practicing. You're only as good as the doctor you are, and the same applies to research. You need to publish. People look at your H-index as much as it's criticised. H-index, if you're not aware, means N publications with greater than N citations. So let's say you've got an H-index of 3. That means you've got 3 or more papers with 3 or more citations. People will ask you, actually, if you're looking to go down the academic path, how many publications did you get during your PhD, and how many were first author? I've been asked that a few times. So it's that publish or perish sort of attitude that is important. So IR training as an academic is more complex. For the reason that academics are experts in their field. So if you want to specialise in a particular area of research, it would be, for example, my interests ablation. If you go to an IR program that doesn't offer ablation, for example, that would make life a bit more difficult. So try and think about what it is, what you want to research in, and try and tailor your training such that it incorporates at least a bit of that research. If you don't have that locally in whichever program you are, try and go out and get that, or else it's going to be hard for you to get a job if you can't do the skills. So you need to think about when, what, and where, and how you're going to keep up with skills in both. They do decline over time, and what gives your home life, your social life, or diagnostic radiology. You can't be good at everything. Academia is not the same as clinical practice. It's not the same as being intelligent. It is about knowledge, but it's not about medical knowledge. The skills are different, and I've got the sort of the formal UK academic pathway here, and I'm contrasting it with the clinical pathway, and these are two interrelated things, but just because you're a consultant doesn't mean you're a senior academic, and vice versa. So you've got to ascend both of these paths if you want to go into academia. And where people who are collaborators who think because they're a consultant that they are a professor, the two are not the same. There's a spectrum of academic doctors everywhere. This, of course, exists in radiology. I've done a sort of traffic light system here. So you've got clinical doctors who aren't interested in research. There's plenty of those in radiology. Clinical doctors who read a lot. You've got clinical doctors who read and potentially write in their spare time. Case series, that's not science really by its formal definition. Then there's academics who are clinicians and scientists. Now, there's a few of those in interventional radiology. They would need a couple of academic sessions. They write grants, prospective studies, and the NHS pays their salary. So that's kind of where I am at the moment. Then these are scarce. I'm not sure these really exist in interventional radiology at the moment. That is what I call a university radiologist. That is a scientist and clinician. They tend to have about 50% academic time, and the university pays their salary. Then I'm pretty sure that there's none of these in interventional radiology, which is an extreme university radiologist, I call it. These often do animal work, and they have about 80 or 90% of their salary, 80, 90% of their sessions over in the university. So that's a sort of spectrum you can be. Obviously, if you're here, you're probably thinking about these sorts of things. But I think they're increasingly more challenging to operate in. Professors, so this is bleak. So 3.5% of students that complete a PhD secure a permanent position at a university. That's a sad statistic. And of these, 12% become a professor. So that's 0.45% of the total. And I think that's even lower in IR. And when you whittle down visiting professors, that's not the same as a full professor. There's very few indeed. So the odds are stacked against us. You need to think about what kind of academic you want to be. Preclinical studies, translational studies. I think that's pretty good for interventional radiology, because we can be like a test ground for new devices. First in man studies. You can have smaller numbers, and then there's trialists. The trials are hard to get into, but I think ultimately, if you're trying to get answers to the question, this is the way to do it. And papers are not the same things as trials. So, whatever you do, this is Doug Altman. I'm sure you guys know. Try and not pollute the literature. Try and do good research. So to maximise the benefit to society, you need to not just do research, but do it well. And he also says we need less research, better research, and research done for the right reasons. So try and basically what I'm saying here is you need to get results, but equally your reputation is built upon your papers. So if you have any personal concerns and you're not sure that the message that if you don't believe in the message that you're conveying, you're sure as hell no one else is going to. So, make sure that your papers are as high quality as possible. You're up against it. There's some, as you know, medics, phenomenal researchers. You're competing with everyone basically. Oncologists, epidemiologists, academic psychiatrists, geneticists, immunologists, surgeons, pathologists. There's some very good speech and language therapists actually who I've been seeing on a course recently. And then of course all the basic scientists if you're applying to streams which aren't sort of clinical or aimed at allied health professionals. Now a lot of the big funding areas, dementia, medical cannabis, mental health, antibiotic resistance and frailty don't necessarily apply to interventional radiology. Obesity, artificial intelligence and cancer, of course it does. Often the NIHR have calls for funding that are on certain topics. So try and be mindful of those and see if you can mold your research slightly. I mean, you don't want to completely dance to their drum, but at the same time, it helps if you're deciding between two projects. Problems and opportunities in academic IR. So, as you know, academic IR no doubt is improving, but we are still in a rudimentary position compared with oncologists, let's say, who have very, very defined research structures out there. You will get people coming who, because it's in people's interest to publish as well. So you'll get people coming up and trying to publish with you. I've got some thoughts as to how you might be able to have a think about who you collaborate with, because that's very important. Beware surrogate endpoints. Lots of papers say good angiographic result. Ghrelin for obesity, anti-Müllerian hormone for fertility. If you have a woman who's trying to conceive, what matters to them? Anti-Müllerian hormone levels or baby in arms? It's the latter. That's what matters. So when you're reading papers, think about endpoints. And then post hoc analyses, absolutely rife in the literature. Really, science is predefining an endpoint and answering that question, and you get to ask one. Reasons why interventional radiologists aren't able to research quite so much. I mean, we're very busy. Of course, we don't admit patients. There's a lack of culture, a lack of established programs, and we actually need to do the cases. So that's the other problem. Is an oncologist in a clinic could see 20, 30 patients in the morning and start them all on various trials, whereas we physically have to go there and do the cases, so our numbers are going to be a lot smaller. It's harder to power the studies, and also you will start with next to nothing. Honestly, people are not going to give you millions of pounds of grant money to begin with. So my next slide's a little bit controversial, but I do hope that it's helpful. So I'm trying to sort of mute it down a bit with some questions. If you wanted to find a doctor, I think these are very reasonable. How many patients do you treat a year with this particular technique? Are you a registered doctor? How long have you been a doctor? And do you work in the NHS? All very, very fair questions. Now, if you're trying to find a collaborator, so the first thing to say is, let's say you've got your PhD. It's your time to come up with independent ideas. So you should really be approaching people, not the other way around. So, and the other thing, it's like going into a relationship research. You would never just say yes if somebody came up to you. You want to know, you want to date them a bit. You want to find out who they are. So things to do your homework. If you've got a collaborator, PubMed them. See if they've got publications coming out. Ideally, if you want a mentor, they should really be having around 10 publications a year. And if they don't have that, maybe they need a mentor and you need a new mentor. How many academic sessions do you have a week is actually a key question, because you need to know, do they actually have time to collaborate with you? And if they don't, I suggest you you look elsewhere, because they're probably not going to have very much time. Do they have a position at a university? Which one is it? You know, what's their reputation? You can ask around informally what their students are like. Do they bring in grant funding? On the whole, authorship conversations are probably better had early on. And if anyone's giving you BS, avoid. That's my recommendation. Sorry, quite a direct slide. Completely my opinion, but this is to be okay. So coming into a new field, so you need mentorship. They don't have to be an interventional radiologist, but they should be highly competent researchers. They should be accessible and anti-hierarchical, really. I've had four kind of main collaborators in a sense. Shonik Punwani was my PhD supervisor, fantastic researcher in prostate. I'm now at the Marsden, and Moo is the professor here. He's giving me advice on how to do research. Now, each of these are diagnostic radiologists, so it's nice to have some input with others. So I'm fortunate enough to be collaborating with Rito Bala, who's a world expert in stereotactic intervention, and I'm also Nahum Goldberg from the Hadassah Medical Center in Harvard. He's actually he is mentoring me basically in reviewing manuscripts, and we're maybe going to start some work soon. So I've been fairly lucky, but you need to think about who you're collaborating with quite seriously. Overcome the chicken and egg situations. It's really difficult. You know, I haven't got a job, so I can't get the funding. So I've got the funding, so I can't get a job. Start small, build up. You're in control of your own destiny, but you know, don't turn down collaboration opportunities if they're reasonable. You know, Christina Messieu, who is another academic here, said, you know, I want to do some complex biopsies and sarcoma. I didn't have an answer to that. I thought, great, let's do that. So that was a reasonable opportunity. I didn't really. I came up with the detail of the idea, but the problem was there set by her. You know, people like you to be useful. You will be an unproven entity. Everyone's judging you. You need a thick skin, and you know, I'm sorry. This is it's the truth. It is not a cozy place. I found it much harder than a PhD. You have less academic clout basically, and you're trying to collaborate with people and dedicate their time to collaborating with you. So it's tricky. Stuff to know. So you need to start finding out about the funding bodies, where you can get money from. NIHR, Wellcome, MRC, charities like Crook. About 1 in 5 are successful, so it's a numbers game. You need to submit lots of grants. I found good ideas come after a good night's sleep and doing other things. So don't dedicate your entire life to interventional radiology research, because it's probably actually counterproductive to the research. Don't procrastinate, you know, get it done. Think about the data, look at it, you know, reflect on it. Have a backup plan. I have some high, medium, and low risk projects. Don't upset people. You will have rejection. Little tips: the paper's worth 1,000 posters. The posters stay up in your attic or whatever and collect dust, and there's no real internet footprint of them. The good things about posters, and there are good things, is they get you to the conference. It's good advertising. You learn how to write. It motivates you into action. But you should be converting them to papers. Quality over quantity. I addressed that earlier. And you need to show progress. Okay, YouTube, Twitter, broadcast is all good fun, but it's not scholarship. And you need to assemble a team. Okay, a statistician, often some kind of mentor, often a scientist, a clinical collaborator, and public and patient involvement, all very, very important. The ideas are most important. It should be interesting, no matter what the result, not too obvious. You should be passionate about it. It should be a big problem that's unsolved. That is tricky. Believe me, that's tricky. Well, for me, it is anyway. You need to think what you can do given your resources. You will have limited resources, so you might not be able to do a randomised trial. I suggest you don't first up. You need protected research time. Don't let the clinical take over. Have a day away, but not a day off. I've got a day away. I probably could have just sat down, just watching Netflix for that day if I wanted for the last 6 months. But in 6 months' time, the question will come: where are these papers? So I haven't done that. That's it. This is something that I need to work on still. Is be challenged, and you need your elevator pitch ready. What's the problem? Why is it important? What are you doing? How can you solve it? How does it justify the charity or taxpayers' money? And what have you found? Ask for advice. You don't have to take it, but you will learn in the process, and know your subject above all. I said don't let the clinical work take over, but don't neglect it, because otherwise you won't be taken seriously. One of the nurses said the other day, I was delighted when she said, you don't do many cases, but whenever you do, it's always very complex, which is great. But then there's another slant to that, which is don't be a cowboy, don't get a complaint, because that will count against you as well. So it's about being novel and innovative without pushing that too hard. So it's lots of complex interactions. No cowboy again. Is that it? Okay, I'll go a little bit into my story, but in some ways, it's not really relevant because your story is what's important. I was on the UCLH training scheme. I then transferred to UCL for a PhD. I went to King's and did a couple of years IR there, did the EBIR exam, and then I went to the Marsden. I got a small grant, RCR pump prime for sarcoma biopsy. And I'm then thinking about an intermediate grant, maybe Sarcoma UK, and then some kind of academic fellowship. But the resolution of this is a bit lower. I'm now a locum consultant in cancer imaging here. I do some resist measurements, biopsies, clinical trials, have a couple of sessions of research, and I tend to do ablation sessions clinically / research sessions because we're starting to robotic intervention. It's still a very much a work in progress. I'm not quite ready to supervise a PhD student, yeah. And then this is some desmoid cryoablation. That's it. How am I doing for time? I'm sorry if that was too fast or too slow, but thank you very much, everyone. I know that was fairly opinionated in places, but I am saying this to try and help. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dr. Johnston. No, that's brilliant for time. Obviously, we're running a little bit late, but we've got 5 minutes at least for questions. There are a few on the chat. So we've already got a comment saying, Dr. Johnston, thanks for a very insightful talk. Such a candid perspective on the academic path after a PhD. I'm sufficiently scared now. But one question is about finding a mentor. Yeah. So the question is, how do you make it explicit that the person becomes your mentor? You know, is it implicit? How do you structure this mentorship if you do?
That's a great question. So let me start with each of my 4 mentors' sort of stories. So Shonit was my PhD supervisor. That is a lifelong relationship, whether you like it or not. As soon as you're accepted onto that PhD, you've got a story there. So Shonit was my PhD supervisor, and he just offers me advice. I can go to him. That's natural, I think, and that will happen with your PhD supervisor. Moo is the head of research here at the Marsden. I wanted to do research. He's very supportive, and I kind of went to him. Is he actually a mentor? I don't know. He's giving me advice. He's not an interventional radiologist, but he's giving me more of infrastructural broad overview, how I can deliver my research in the Marsden. So I think you need somebody like that who can advise you who to go and speak to. So that's his role. Rito, I saw him speak at ECIO, and in 2014, I was blown away by this guy, and I just went up to speak to him after. I was like, that was absolutely phenomenal. I was like, I don't really know why I haven't got the Nobel Prize or something. And he was a totally chill guy. He was just like, come see me, like, and so I went to Innsbruck and like we started writing papers together, and then he was just very accommodating. That was kind of luck. He's very busy. I'm doing slightly different things now. So that's perhaps not that he's there. He's encouraged me to do IR research. He helped me think about writing papers with him. I've written about 6 or 7 papers with him. That really helped my stats, the way I think about it, and his team. So that was a different kind of thing. Now the last Prof. Goldberg is probably the most the most traditional sort of can you mentor me kind of sense. And I was at actually Rito's course in Innsbruck, and he was just hanging around in this in the CT scanner, and I just went up to him. I was like, oh, just to say, love your papers, big fan. And he was just like, oh, well, I don't need another paper particularly. It was like, if there's anything I can do to help. I was like, well, he was like, send me an email, there's my business card. I was like, so, yeah, I sent him an email that night, and then he didn't get back to me. Okay. So then you need to email again. So I emailed again, and then he said, I'm so sorry, I know you've emailed me twice now, and I think that actually helped the persistence. And actually, I started reviewing some papers for radiology RSNA, and he sort of fortuitously was asked by the journal to help me with reviewing. So we have Zoom calls every now and then, and I was starting to talk about my research and so forth. He's a tough guy. He's full on, like, and you have to do your preparation and be available. That's the other thing. It's really important. It works both ways. You need to get back to your emails. They need to get back to your emails, to their emails. That's what I'd say. It's good luck, really. I'm sorry, I don't know whether that particularly helped. That's just my story. But basically, be proactive, speak to people, do your homework. I knew these guys were highly, highly competent researchers. And, I kind of more or less know my subject in the area that I'm interested in for my age. I mean, I know nothing like what they know, but yeah, they've been very accommodating. So yeah.
Thank you. Another question is on the number of academic focused IR roles or positions in the UK. Do you think there's an appetite and funding for more of these places, or are we better suited to go abroad to seek out these opportunities? That's the question.
No, there's none. Okay, you need to make them. Sorry. People will be supportive. I think people want academic IR in the country. I've spoken to multiple other professors in other specialties who are flabbergasted why we don't have academic IRs really formally in the UK. And they're going to be supportive, but they're not going to. No professor's going to sit down, clear a couple of weeks, and work through. They just don't have the bandwidth. So you're going to have to work damn hard and probably start with some fairly small papers and build up. Really, you're not going to get millions of pounds of grant funding to begin with.
Yeah. I agree, Ed, and obviously with PhD you're going to learn the skills, aren't you, to use in your practice.
It's training. PhD is training. That's what you need. You need to go to medical school to learn to be a doctor. You need a PhD really to learn to be an academic. They are you could read in your own time, but there's no substitute, I'm telling you.
One last question, if that's okay. In your opinion, does it matter doing a PhD or an MD in regard to subsequent success and opportunities?
Well, you could study that, couldn't you? It's an interesting. You can look at people's post-nominals and their output. Anyway, is it? So historically, so it's hard. So Moo and Christina here both have an MD, and they are phenomenal researchers. but they're older. They're of a different generation. Has it become increasingly? I think it will become increasingly important. What is the difference between a PhD and an MD? 1 year. That's what it is. If you actually look at what the university, well, certainly at UCL where I was, if you look at what they say, it's kind of the same thing. But it's nice to have a 3-year experience, and a PhD is a higher degree than an MD, so it will be looked on more favorably by, but whether that actually, you can be a good researcher and not even have one, but I think it's actually more difficult. So yeah, I would recommend a PhD. If you're into research, do three years of it. It's fun. I was only getting going in my 3rd year, really.
Brilliant. I think I'm going to have to close this session. Thank you so much again, Dr. Johnston, for your time and sharing all those brilliant pearls. And obviously hope to hear from you again. So we're on to our break. So I think we should take a quick comfort break.